Okay.
So if you have projects that are in that 5 megawatts or less range, 1 to 5 megawatts, well, you get expedited transmission access. It's cheaper and it's quick. It's immediate that you can gain access to the transmission, because all the power, if you locate these projects on the high voltage side of a substation that's serving a community, virtually all of the power produced by your project is pretty much guaranteed to be consumed within that community. And if it's not, it'll be the next community down the road that uses it. And we'll never be pushing power back onto the high voltage system and causing disruptions and curtailments from that perspective. So size is critical, but size is also important because at that community scale, with a public benefits entity that is attached to that community, it means that we're producing economic development for that community, we're producing jobs for that community in terms of maintenance and construction and operations of the facility. We're generating local wealth for that community. We're preventing the exportation of dollars, energy dollars that would otherwise go out of our community to cartel players that are far away and have totally different agendas. And the environment's along for the ride with it. We don't have to worry about the carbon for the climate chaos or the mercury poisoning or the nuclear waste, because we've got our own with it. And so when we get legislation that establishes the criteria for access to this tariff that the Public Utilities Commission enacts, that allows us to have these kinds of projects to cash flow in community after community, why then we can also start to serve the large urban centers, because we can establish partnerships between large urban centers and communities around about who could develop these kinds of projects again without disrupting the system, but enabling them to partner up with the local entity, and while they might not be using the power from that specific generation, they'd be displacing power that the utility system would otherwise be transporting large distances. And so they can gain economic benefit from that as well. And that's a way that we can grow the system step by step and point by point in such a way that we can rapidly deploy a large number of dispersed and distributed generation, and in a relatively short time phase out the kinds of generation, obsolete generation, that is causing so much trouble in terms of irradiated fuel and climate chaos. So that's on the supply side. Now, the other thing that we're working towards has to do with, there's a supply side component, but it's also on the demand side, because so often people who are low income people, or people living in apartments that have landlords that don't give a shit, are stuck with very inefficient appliances, obsolete technologies to perform functions. They're paying exorbitant amounts, exorbitant fractions of their income for energy. Often 40-50%, whereas the average person, the average middle class or upper class person is spending maybe 2 or 5% of their income for energy. So those disparities are real, and we need to identify mechanisms to address them. And a mechanism that can do that is called tariff-based inclusive financing. The tariff-based simply refers to the fact that the electric utility serving that load has access to capital that it can gain a return on its investment from if it uses it for the right purpose. And the right purpose would be to, say, buy a new refrigerator for a person living in an apartment building. And because the person living in that apartment building happens to now have a more efficient refrigerator, why their energy bill goes down, because they're not using as much electricity. And because their energy bill goes down, we can capture that savings. Part of that savings is used to pay the capital that was used to purchase the refrigerator, and the utility gets a return on that, so they should be happy. The other fraction of that saving goes to the consumer, because he's using less electricity, or she. And they're happy because their energy bill goes down. Society's happy because we have less pollution. Everybody's happy if we figure out how